She thought she could humiliate the quiet girl in front of the entire school, but what she didn't know was that nobody, had been preparing for this moment her whole life. If you love shocking twists, unbelievable turnarounds, and justice served in the most satisfying way, then stick around, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories just like this one, because this one will leave you speechless. On the first Monday of September, when the new academic year at Westview High was barely 2 weeks old, 16-year-old Liana Harper walked into the auditorium with her hands wrapped tightly around the straps of her backpack, hoping this assembly would pass as uneventfully as the others she had endured since transferring to the school 3 months earlier, but she didn't know that this particular morning would erupt into the moment that would define her entire life. The auditorium was buzzing with whispers, laughter, and clusters of students forming social circles that seemed welded together by years of friendship, and Liana, a quiet, brilliant girl with a habit of blending into corners, moved through the crowd like a shadow, until the moment she accidentally brushed past Miranda Blake, the self-appointed queen of the school, the girl who seemed to command power with the same casual ease as breathing, whose designer heels and perfectly curled blonde hair signaled her family's money and her own ruthless authority, and Miranda spun around with the sort of dramatic flair that suggested she'd been waiting for an opportunity to publicly humiliate someone, sneering as she asked Liana why she didn't watch where she was going, but Liana didn't respond, because she didn't want trouble, though of course her silence only provoked more mockery, and before Liana could step away, Miranda slapped her hard across the face, the sharp sound echoing through the auditorium so loudly that nearly all 200 students fell silent at once. Liana's cheek burned, her eyes stung, and her breath hitched, not from the pain, though the sting was real, but from the shock of it, because she had endured bullying before, but never so public, never so violent, never so humiliating, and Miranda smirked triumphantly, assuming she had demonstrated her dominance once again, expecting Liana to shrink away and cry or flee the auditorium in shame, but instead, Liana stood completely still, her face expressionless, her eyes cool, and the silence grew denser, heavier, until Miranda began shifting uncomfortably, as though she had just provoked something she couldn't name. Liana had a secret, one she never planned to use, a promise she had made to her late father, who had raised her differently than other kids, who had trained her not only academically but physically, mentally, and strategically from the time she was 8 years old, because he used to be a military intelligence specialist before founding a private security company that worked with governments worldwide, and he believed that Liana should know how to defend herself in every way possible, but after he passed away, Liana promised herself she would never use those skills unless absolutely necessary, and as she touched her burning cheek, she realized this moment wasn't about retaliation or rage, it was about changing the dynamic of her entire life, and the lives of every other student who had suffered in silence at the hands of Miranda and her clique. So, without raising her voice or breaking eye contact, Liana spoke in a steady, calm tone that chilled the room. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, and Miranda scoffed, telling her to run along, but before Miranda could turn away, Liana gently, almost gracefully, reached out and intercepted Miranda's wrist as the bully attempted to shove her again, twisting it in a controlled motion that was firm without being violent, a maneuver Liana had mastered years ago, and Miranda let out a startled gasp, caught between confusion, pain, and disbelief, because no one had ever dared stand up to her, much less touch her. The crowd erupted in whispers as Liana released her wrist and stepped back, not attacking, not threatening, simply demonstrating that she could not be harmed again so easily, and that one moment shifted the balance of the entire school, but it was only the beginning, because later that day, videos of the slap and Liana's calm defense went viral across the school, and rumors spread that Miranda had lost her crown, and the teachers began paying more attention to the bullying that had long gone unchecked, and for the first time, the administration summoned Miranda's parents, who were powerful donors, to discuss disciplinary action, which ignited a messy chain reaction. Miranda's mother, furious that anyone dared challenge her daughter's reputation, tried to spin a narrative that Miranda had only playfully tapped Liana, but the video proved otherwise, and during the meeting, Liana remained composed while Miranda grew increasingly unhinged, her voice cracking as she insisted she was the victim. The school imposed a week-long suspension, but more importantly, the incident triggered an investigation into multiple past complaints from other students, many of which pointed directly at Miranda's long pattern of cruelty. Meanwhile, Liana, who had never wanted attention, found herself becoming an accidental symbol of resistance, and students who had once been silent began approaching her to share their own stories, But the real twist came 2 weeks later when the Board of Education announced that Liana had been nominated for the State Student Leadership Award because a teacher had anonymously submitted the viral video along with an essay about strength and integrity in the face of bullying, and while Liana was reluctant to accept the spotlight, she agreed to attend the ceremony, where she was asked to give a speech. On the night of the event, the auditorium was packed, and as Liana stepped onto the stage, her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady as she spoke not about the slap, not about revenge, but about how power should never be used to harm others, how silence allows cruelty to grow, and how one act of bravery, even one you never intended to make, can inspire change. The audience gave her a standing ovation, but the story didn't end there, because another twist unfolded. While researching the award nominee, a journalist discovered that Liana's late father had left behind a sizable trust fund tied to philanthropic projects focused on student safety and mental health, and the board invited Liana to help guide the development of new anti-bullying programs across the state, giving her a platform far bigger than she ever expected. Meanwhile, Miranda, whose suspension had spiraled into mandatory counseling, slowly began facing the deeper emotional issues she had long ignored, and though she tried to maintain her old persona, the school no longer feared her, and even her closest friends distanced themselves, not out of cruelty but because they no longer wanted to participate in her behavior. In a final unexpected twist, months later, Miranda approached Liana, not with hostility, but with a trembling attempt at something close to apology, admitting she didn't understand why she acted the way she did and asking Liana how she learned to stay so calm under pressure. Liana, who never held grudges, simply said, "I learned that strength doesn't come from hurting people, it comes from knowing you could fight, but choosing not to," and in that moment, something in Miranda melted, not instantly transforming her into a better person, but beginning the long process of change. By the end of the school year, Liana had become not the feared fighter some imagined, but the respected leader everyone needed, proving once and for all that the slap meant to break her became the strike that built her future, and her response, calm, controlled, courageous, changed everything in ways no one at Westview High could have ever predicted.